Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Avero Advisors live stream, where today we are diving in to our public safety realm and how we help those in that sector modernize. I know I'm not AV and I'm not Dave, but we do have our one of our directors of client success, specifically in the public safety space, Mr. Mike Cole. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Megan.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. I'm super excited about this session. And for those of you who are joining, two things: let us know where you're joining from, interact with us in the chat box, and then also with this little QR code above my head, or at least that's what it looks like to me. Please sign up for our Insights workshop. Later on this month, we will be going live for 4 hours and discussing all things digital transformation in the public sector. And we would love to have you join us. So please scan that QR code before you leave our live stream today. Again, we'd love to have you join us and ask questions and gain insight to what we do on a daily basis. Real quick, Avero Advisors was established in 2016 with the sole purpose to modernize government operations, really. Our strong points are business process reengineering, ERP consulting, and IT strategic planning. So real quick, I'm going to pass the mic to Mike Cole, pass the mic to Mike, and let him introduce himself and tell a little bit about his background and why he has decided to make the jump over to the consulting space. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So I was in the government space for 34 years. I was sworn law enforcement for 34 years. I worked for 10 years at a county sheriff's office, and then I worked the last 24 years of my career at a municipal city police department. I've done everything from officer to chief. I spent many, many years managing and organizing and really keeping modern the technologies at the police department. So everything technology related at a police department was my responsibility, from reviewing and procuring to ongoing maintenance and IT support. When I retired, I was asked by AV and Avero to come over and assist with public safety. I was very familiar with AV. We had used AV in his consulting role at the police department, and even the IT department for our town had used AV, and we were very happy with the services. So I knew he did quality work. I knew he cared about client success and customer outcomes. And they were trying to get more into the public safety space. And with my experience, they wanted to bring me on to help them facilitate that.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing, Mike. And just real quick, what are some of the nuances or some of the pain points that most public safety or police department agencies face when thinking about technology and modernizing? What are the most common pain points that you see and that you've seen in your past?
Sure, there's a number of them. Most police officers, cops, are not real technology driven. So we don't have
Mhm.
a firm understanding of the underlying technology. And when people start talking about technologies and using acronyms, it can sometimes go over our heads, and we don't really understand. And because of that, we can accept what people are saying when it might not be the case. There's times where people will try to sell you something and they'll tell you this is the only way to do it because, and they explain it, you don't understand it, you go, okay. Or somebody
Mhm.
just proposes a solution, and if you're not really technology based, you don't understand all the ramifications or the other potential solutions out there. So that's one of them. I think another is, which is very similar with all of our government clients. We're busy. We are understaffed. We are overworked. We are trying to just get the job done. And then you say, hey, here's a year and a half technology project. I need a bunch of your staff 40 hours a week committed to this project. There's no resources to put on those projects. And
Right.
that's where a firm like Vero that understands public safety can help. We can alleviate a lot of that time resources from your staff by taking care of those projects on your behalf and do most of the heavy lifting. And then we check in on a regular basis with you to make sure that we're on track with your desires. Funding, obviously, funding in the government sector is always an issue. We're on budget cycles. It's not like private industry where we just say, hey, here's a $2 million whiz bang that would be great. And we say, okay, let's buy it. Their budgets are set months in advance, and they're set for a
Mhm.
year. And you can't just go out and buy something that wasn't budgeted. We're dealing with grant funding on different timelines. Your city or state may be on a different funding timeline than the federal timeline. So you've got different reporting standards, money's expiring at different times. The need to segregate that money for reporting purposes is another one. And then, technology is changing so fast.
Mhm.
It's crazy everywhere, and even in the law enforcement realm, there's so much coming out. It's hard to keep current with what's available. It's hard to know how will that integrate with the technologies that I currently have, and on an ongoing basis, it's hard to maintain it. I see a lot of public safety agencies that will go out and procure technology, but they haven't really set up a sustainment program. So, not only identifying funding sources to make sure that you're doing the maintenance year over year, or you've got a replacement fund for when the technology ages out and it needs to be replaced, but a steering committee from your police department that looks at all of your technologies,
Mhm.
how it integrates and advises your municipality on how to best utilize that technology going forward, and how to keep it current, that what you have current. I see a lot of agencies spend millions of dollars on big software platforms, and then they don't have the staff devoted to maintenance. And so updates come out that they never optimize, that they never turn on. And 3 or 4 years down the road, they go, this software isn't nearly as efficient as it was when we integrated it initially. Why is that? Well, because you don't have someone paying attention to the day-to-day maintenance functions of that.
Right. And one of the things I personally think is, you could have all these dreams and visions and number one, not have the funding or not know how to implement, the said technology, but how do you prioritize which technology or which thing to fix first? Right. And do you have thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that goes back partly to my previous answer, the steering committee. I think you need
Hmm.
stakeholders from throughout the organization that have an understanding of what's happening in each one of those functional areas of what the needs are. You bring that in a committee format back and discuss your options. What are we looking at this year for implementation? What really are our needs? How will that affect the other areas of the department that might overlap or utilize the software? And then you really need to have somebody from your IT department on those committees because they're going to be required to help with the implementation. They're going to be required to help with the maintenance, the ongoing issues of that software. So you really need their buy-in as well. And then you need somebody who's involved in the budgeting process because
Hmm.
you have to identify a fund. It's got to be realistic. You've got to be able to sell it to your council. You've got to be able to explain the ongoing maintenance year to year that this will affect for budgetary purposes as well. And then any replacement funds, if you're buying hardware, what's the life cycle and how often are you going to have to replace that?
Yeah. And so,
Good,
in
good.
your opinion, oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Did you say something else? I think I cut you off.
Good communication is the key between all of
Oh,
those
yeah.
different stakeholders and regular communication.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in your opinion, at what stage is it smart to bring in a consultant like a Vero? And not only that, what once you bring in a consultant, we'll use a Vero as an example, but what is our approach? What is our approach to this process, and how do we stand out amongst our competitors?
Great. You asked a few questions there, so let me try and
Yeah.
make sure I hit all of them. When should you bring in a consultant? I would say as soon as you identify a need and your desire to fulfill that need. So once you
Mhm.
say, "Hey, our software is aging out. It's unstable. It needs to be replaced," we have the desire to do that. At that point, I would bring in a consultant for a lot of the reasons we talked about before, just the time management issues.
Mhm.
Expertise is another one. We don't replace major software components very often. I say most people in government will probably do it once in their career. You,
Right.
you replace a major ERP, or you replace your records management solution for a police department. Your hope is that that's going to be a 20-year. You do it correctly, it'll be a 20-year solution for you. You don't want to be doing this every 2 or 3 years. The time commitment, the data conversion, the data loss, the amount that these things cost to replace is enormous, and your staff time lost on these projects. So setting the right foundation and bringing in the expertise early is absolutely critical. I like to tell people, you may replace your records management solution once in your career. We're doing this all the time, every year. We have a lot of experience. We talk to the vendors. We know what's out there. We know what's good. We know what's bad. And we know the pitfalls that you should watch out for. There's a lot of common mistakes that we've seen, and we can help mitigate those as well. So I would say, as soon as you've identified the need and your desire to actually do something about it, bring in the consultants. Where we, I think, are unique. One is we only service the government sector, and most consulting firms try to do everything for everybody. You can be a mile wide and an inch deep. You can service everybody, but not do any of it particularly well. We've decided to focus specifically on the public market. So we deal with government agencies. Um, the expertise that we bring into public safety, I think, is unique. You don't find consulting firms that have people who have spent a career in law enforcement and dealing with law enforcement technology. They don't understand why is public safety different than dealing with accounting at a municipality. They don't understand, um, a CGIS. They don't understand the certifications, the security protocols, how every state is different. If you're reporting to IBR, to your state, well, every state sets up their own standards for how that happens. You can't just say, well, we did it for Alabama, and so sure, California is exactly the same. It's not. It's different, and you have to understand that. So I am the director of public safety. With my experience, my team, I have David Buchanan on board. David was a sergeant for a sheriff's office, so he understands public safety as well. Our vice president of client success was an IT director for a municipality who worked very closely with police departments, so he understands that as well. So we're very, very familiar with police departments, how they operate, and why they're different and unique.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to say there is no one size fits all best approach. I mean, whether you're dealing with the school system or public safety or just a local city or county, there is no one size fits all. Everyone is unique. Everyone has unique pain points. There are some commonalities across different things, but everyone has a unique approach or unique operations within their organization. So thank you for sharing that, Mike. And I was going to say, you've been through several implementations over the years. So we're excited to have your expertise. And as you all know, Dave was on last week, and you all have met Robert, who is our VP of Client Success. They all have backgrounds in government operations. So I'm going to go to the comments really quick, Mike, if you don't mind. Kyler, thank you for joining. She says, looking forward to this conversation. And she said, what is the best method to test these systems? So I think she posted that comment when we were talking about, prioritizing what systems to implement and at what time, and having the committee and budgeting for the project. But after that's implemented, what is the best method to test these systems?
So we're talking about once we've selected and we're
Mm-hmm.
implementing testing.
And we have,
Great. So,
how do we ensure that they are working for our organization or specifically in public safety?
that is a great question, and I think it's something that's often overlooked. I think a lot of times, again, that time crunch with personnel. Hey, we spent all this time trying to pick a vendor, and now we spent all this time selecting. Let's
Mhm.
just turn it on and get moving forward. And if you don't stress test these things and make sure that they're operating the way that they should be, you can end up with a lot of problems down the road. This really goes back to that, when do you bring in your consultants? We come in very, very early in the process, preferably, and we spend a lot of time on the initial groundwork. We identify stakeholders in all the different functional areas. We spend a lot of time talking to them. We call them discovery and visioning sessions. What is your current need? What are you doing with the software? In a perfect world, what would the software be able to do? we keep all of those notes. We categorize them. We use those to write the RFP to make sure that the vendors responding can meet the needs that you've asked for. And then when we go into demonstrations, we use all of that data to create scripts. So we don't just take vendors at their word. You said you can do A. When we get to demonstrations, we
Right.
say, okay, now show us A. Show us how
Hmm.
your software does A, so we can, number one, know that you can really do that. Because there are times that we have had vendors, salesmen will tell you, yes, our software can do all of that. And when you sign the contract and get to implementation, it turns out the engineers go, the software was never designed to do that. It can't do it. So if you don't make them show you, you may not be getting what you think you're getting. And then it allows you to ask questions around how that works and how that would work in your organization. We take all of that data and we use that to create test scripts so that when we're in the implementation phase, we know what was important to you. We know how your business processes should work. And we say, okay, now we're going to take dispatchers and we're going to run through the computer aided dispatch system. Here's what you've said is important. Here's your business processes. Let's run scripts and start testing that. Run this business process the way that you said that it should work. Test the software. Now let's have a bunch of them doing it at once and make sure it can handle multiple calls. Let's see how that flows through to the officers. So using all of that groundwork information that we've done early on, testing that in the implementation phase before you go live and make sure that it's working is absolutely critical.
Absolutely. And then we have Bent who says, who is the best IT guy you've worked with?
Well, I'll probably be fired if I don't say Robert because Robert and I worked together at a municipality in Arizona. He was the IT director. I was commander in charge of all things support services and technology at the time.
Mhm.
Robert, I will say, is probably the best IT guy that I've worked with. He was great. So we had a lot of stress on us. We worked for the wealthiest per capita municipality in Arizona, one of them in the country. And we had fallen very, very far behind in technology. We were right in the heart of a giant municipal valley, Phoenix area. And we
Mhm.
had a very low crime rate because it was a very affluent area. It was all multi-million dollar homes, no commercial at all. But we were nestled right between two huge cities that had very high crime rates. And for many, many years, the town manager of our town felt, well, our crime rate is so low, there's no point in investing in technology and spending all this money. We don't need it. And when he left and we got a new town manager that looked at it and said, we are the wealthiest municipality in the state. Why don't we have computers in cars? That's like an industry standard. So we
Right.
got a shopping list from I like to call it a blank check from our council that said, yeah, we expect you to be the technology leaders in this state, if not in the country. Go identify what technologies are out there, what technologies you should have, and get it implemented. And we did. We spent a lot of time. We went around the country looking at technologies. Robert and I did a lot of road trips, making sure that the technologies work the way that we thought that they would. And then
Mhm.
we got several $1 million to implement it. And then we got thrown a twist once we got the money. We had a chief who was not, and or the budget cycles. It was a new chief. He was worried the money would evaporate if we didn't spend it that fiscal year. So they said, here's
Mhm.
multi-million dollars and multiple technologies, and they should all integrate. She says, oh yeah, and I want it all done in this fiscal year. It came out successful. It's a real testimony to the he does and the commitment to clients that he has.
Right, right. I would agree with that. I think Robert is a very, very intelligent problem solver, and I think he's seen it. He's seen just about everything, in my opinion, based on what I know and some of the projects I've worked alongside him on in the account management space. So, Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. Happy to see your comment in the chat. So, he says, "Good morning. In your opinion, how have the needs of the workforce changed over the last decade with respect to compliance, fatigue management, and recruit and retention, et cetera?" What a great question. Mike, do you have thoughts?
There is a lot there. Recruitment and retention in the law enforcement space has been a huge issue. In 34 years, I've seen it cyclical before. When I started, there were hundreds of applicants for every one position. Everybody wanted to be on the police force. Um, Lately, there is a handful of applicants for every position. Um, Typically, a third of those don't even show up for the interview process. A third of them can't pass the physical, and then the background issues, and the rate that we are losing officers into retirement or early retirements is not keeping pace with the rate that we are adding new employees on. We are seeing a real crisis in the law enforcement space right now. That departments just keep going down and down in their employee staffing to the point where we get into this cycle where we start stealing from each other. We say, hey, if you'll come over to my PD from that PD, I'm going to pay you X, and I'm going to give you a bonus, and I'm whatever, and all that really does end up doing is driving up our costs, and it kind of reduces loyalty for departments and officers, and the void is still there. We're just seeing officers jump around to whoever's making the best offer, do their time for however long they have to stay there for that bonus, and then move on to the next one for another bonus. So it's not a great solution. What we need to do is make the job attractive. Part of that is us. We need to be good employers where people want to come and work and want to do their career once they get there. And part of it is just what happens in society. We see that pendulum swing from everybody loves public safety to everybody hates public safety. We get a viral video of one cop being a bad actor and sentiment changes. Cops are bad. And then we see the firefighters running up a staircase at 9/11 and everybody loves public safety. So it's just a natural cycle. I think we need to do a better job at recruiting. I think we need to do a better job at selling ourselves, what we do. It's so easy for someone to put a video of one cop acting bad and it goes viral to millions of people, but we don't see the day-to-day heroism and the things that people are just doing to positively affect lives. We need to do a better job at marketing ourselves, at what we're really about and what we really do. So I think that's really critical on the hiring and the retention side. Fatigue is always a tough factor. You deal with high stress, you deal with shift work, nights, weekends, you deal with changing technologies. Just the volume of change that comes in can be fatiguing for people. Mental health has been a huge push in the last few years. Suicide rates were going up quite dramatically for police officers. And so officer mental health, well-being, wellness programs became very popular. And I think we need to continue to push those. We need to have a check-in. Cops are alpha males, and we don't like to say, hey, I'm really struggling. That was a really bad call. A child died. Person was severely injured. I'm really having trouble with that because we see that as a sign of weakness, and weakness in the law enforcement profession is not something that you want to be seen as. So we need to do a better job at giving people avenues to reach out anonymously for help when that happens. And there's a lot of good agencies and programs for stress. We've got a lot of good critical incident teams out there. And if your agency doesn't have one, hook up with a local agency that does, or there's even national programs that will provide some support. So find and implement something like that to help out with the stress. I'm not sure, was there another part of that question?
I think we got it all. Compliance, fatigue, management, recruit, and retention. I think we covered
Yeah,
all of
and
those.
compliance, the
Compliance.
compliance component. Yeah, there's state and federal compliance standards for
Mhm.
every agency. The federal standards are pretty much set. They're easier because they don't change too much state to state. Sometimes the federal agencies will allow the states, will say these are the standards. It's up to the states how they comply with those standards, and that will vary. We'll see that sometimes, but yeah, that's really just a matter of staying on top of what's happening in the state, the organization, making sure that you're aware of those changes, participating in any statewide groups. So if you've got a chiefs association, stay involved in that. the International Chiefs Association has their technology section that has conferences every year. I used to attend those every year in my position. Go to those and find out what's happening, what's coming up, what's changing in technology standards, compliance, implementation, and then sign up for their discussion board. So when some of those things start to happen, you'll be on the discussion boards that are kind of giving you an alert. Hey, our state just did this. It looks like it might be a federal standard that's changing, might affect your state, and you can get ahead of the curve on it.
Right. Mike, you're really living up to this trusted advisor. What great advice you had there. I love a good message board where I can communicate and look for information of what's out there and how I can stay up to date on all things public safety, right? Not just technology. And then in addition to, I love what you said about mental health. I think that is very important in everyone's lives, but in particular for the ones who are saving our lives. So thank you for sharing that. I really do appreciate it. Kyler had a good question earlier, and I do want to dive into this a little bit before we run out of time. But she says, is public safety, is it a best of breed solution? So I guess we're talking about a CMS or even records management, or should these be included in the ERP suite?
Sure, good question. I honestly was not that familiar with ERP until I came onto Avero. It's kind of segregated from public safety. So the public safety software doesn't generally integrate with your ERP software. It's standalone. It's very specific to what we are doing. And we talked about some of those compliance standards. So there's state and federal standards for who can see certain data, who can access certain data. There's different testing and certification levels you have to go through for each one of those things, and for each level. We had volunteers that they had to go through training that they could only see it. If we left a sheet of something sitting out, they could see it, and they're in compliance. Our dispatchers, whole different level of training and compliance and certification. They're entering property people into the stolen national database or the missing persons database or the warrants, and they're taking that property out. Very different level of compliance. So because of those state and federal standards for what you can see, what you can do, what you can access on a network, and a lot of the data that we deal with are on secure encrypted networks. We had programs running that were a standalone T1 router right to our state public safety department that went through their routers, their firewalls. Those things can't have cross access into the rest of the town and the municipality, where somebody could accidentally come across it, could see it, that would put us in violation of those standards and compliance. So for those reasons, it's really not integrated. It's a standalone product. As far as best in breed, I would say we are independent, so we don't express a preference for one software over another. We don't get a kickback from a software vendor for selling their software. We don't care. We want what's in the client's best interest. And there are certainly, looking at demonstrations, talking to vendors, there are definite differences in modernization, usability, efficiency of current RMS standards. But that said, it really goes back to that groundwork. Not every solution is right for every department, and it's really
That's right.
understanding your needs. I have agencies that say, I only want a cloud-based solution. You have to find me a cloud-based solution. I don't have the IT staff to support an on-premise solution. I don't have the hardware budget to do that every year. It's just easier to write a maintenance check every year and let the vendor deal with it. And then I have other agencies that say, I'm not there yet on the security of the web and what happens if my internet connection goes down. I want an on-premise solution. And then you get agencies that say, I want a hybrid. I want best of both worlds. So there are standouts in the software market for the records management solutions, the CAD, the dispatch, and then it's really finding the right solution for that agency's particular needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Great answer, Mike. I want to ask a question. I know we have a lot of comments. You guys keep commenting, keep asking. If we don't get to every question today, we will go back in and personally comment and make sure all the questions get answered. But can you walk us through, Mike, what a judicial CMS system is? Like, what is it? What can it do? Why do we use them, or why are they being used in the public safety space?
Sure. We are currently working with Sonoma. We went through a competitive bid process and won their business, and we're really excited to work with them. They've been a fantastic partner with us. So their probation department is looking at replacing their case management system, which is what we're talking about here. It's very complicated. So, when you do a police department, they only have to worry about, well, we've got cops and investigators who are cops and dispatchers, and that's pretty much it. When you talk about a probation department, you are talking about multifaceted, multi levels. They are probably dealing with juvenile probation officers. They're probably dealing with adult probation, which is very different, different standards. And when we talk about compliance, minors versus adults, very different. They may actually be dealing with a jail population. If their juvenile facility is running like a juvenile detention facility, they now have those housing issues to deal with. They are probably looking at outpatient programs, drug services, mental health counseling, those sorts of things, housing services. Where do we put people when they get out of detention and they need a place to stay while they're on supervised probation? They may be interacting with different faith-based groups that are trying to provide services for these people to help them integrate back into society. They're actually doing work for the courts, so they do a lot of pre-sentencing. There's just so much to them. They may have a financial aspect. They may have probationers that are on some kind of restitution program that they have to account for. The money's coming in, the money's going out. There's just really, really a lot to it. Um, and so because of that, they are very, very complicated. Each one can be very different. And so that goes back to that groundwork. We really need to have a good partnership where we sit down and say, we need to identify all of your stakeholders, your internal stakeholders, as well as your external stakeholders. And we need to find out what their needs are. And we need to make sure that the software addresses those needs appropriately. And that can be a little bit of a time consuming process up front, but it's going to pay dividends for years when you actually have the software functional and implemented into your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to show Eric's comment really quick with UKG. He says, we offer public safety scheduling, which integrates with timekeeping and payroll. Beyond this, we believe our other public safety apps should be best of breed. Thank you, Eric, for joining us, and thank you for your comment. We really appreciate you and your support. Let's get back. We have some questions back in the chat. We have some Avero employees joining us today. Hello, Clay. Hello, Jake. But I want to highlight their questions because I think that they are very good. So, how do you manage the people side of an implementation? And do you have any stories specifically about change management during an implementation? Great, great question, Clay.
Oh, that's a funny question.
Is it?
So
Okay.
we always say in law enforcement, there's two things that cops hate. Cops hate change, and they hate the way things are.
Mhm.
And that's very, very true. We complain constantly. Cops aren't happy if we're not complaining. So we hate the way things are. It sucks. It sucks. It sucks here. This is terrible. And then when you bring in something new, why do I have to change? I've already figured out the other process. It's
Yeah.
just very, very typical. So yeah, the people side is absolutely huge. I'm a relationship guy. I believe in building relationships, and I think that's key really to that change management that we're talking about.
Mhm.
Good communication across all facets of the organization. Here's where we're at. Here's where we're going. Here's why we're doing it. Here's what's coming next. Here's what you should expect. The human side of it is that communication involving people. They have to feel that they have skin in the game. So
Mhm.
I would get stakeholders from every area of the organization, have them test the software, sit in on the demonstrations. If there's hardware choices, bring in samples and let them test them and have a vote in what they're going to use. So get their
Mhm.
buy-in, communicate with them so they know what's coming. Make sure that your policies and procedures are up to date as well, because a lot of the way that we do things are going to change based on the new software. And If you haven't articulated that to them and given them, they're just going to do what they want to do, and you're going to get really different outcomes than what you might have expected. And then really, the compliance side, going back to that, is the final piece of that. So you have to have some process in place where you say, okay, we've trained you, we've given you the policy and our expectations. Now we're actually going to go back and make sure that you're doing what we've asked you to do in the way that we've asked you to do it. So the story sides, um, for all of my public safety friends, you know what I'm talking about. Cops are devious. They will find any way to get around doing something that they don't want to do. I had a detective bureau that had no technology in their cars, and as part of that big technology initiative, we gave them mobile printers. They could print search warrants, they could print property receipts right in their cars. We gave them laptops to do their work out in the field. Um, we put gateways in the car so that they would have network connectivity. Those gateways had GPS monitors, which for me as a commander, actually in charge of a detective division, I've got detectives going out all over the county, and I need to be able to find those guys if they're in trouble. The last thing I want is a spouse or a significant other calling me at 5:30 saying my husband never came home, my wife never came home. Where is she? Is she okay? Is he okay? And I can't find him because they decided to go out and do some follow up, and they didn't tell anybody. They didn't call it a dispatch, and I've got no way to trace them and start sending help their way. So for me, that was hugely important from a safety standpoint. From them, it was command staffs just spying on me. They want to see what I'm doing. And so you would find a lot of GPS leads that would mysteriously come loose uh, during the course of the day, and we would lose GPS feed or those sorts of things are very, very common in new technology implementation in police departments. And so that compliance component, especially up front when the technology is new, until people are just used to this as the new way of doing business, is
Mhm.
absolutely huge.
Yeah,
I would
absolutely.
write that component. I would say this position, generally my position, is responsible for doing an audit of however many, whatever it is, per month and documenting it, and so that it was on me. I had said that's the standard, and I would have to go back and make a calendar reminder and do those things and document them so that when the chief says, are we really using our body worn cameras, or did I just spend a couple $100,000 for nothing? I could go back and say, here's the audit logs. 97% of the calls we've got video on, the other three we've got documented why we didn't, whatever it is. But yeah, it's really important. And for, I think, transparency for your council, when they're spending this kind of money, they want to know that they're getting value out of it, that it's being used. And for your public to know, are you really doing what you say you're doing when you tell us that this is our
Right,
policy and this is our standards? Are you really doing that?
right. Yeah. No, I agree with everything you're saying, Mike. We say all the time that these types of projects are not technology projects, they're more people projects, right? I mean, we're asking them to change the way that they've done business for years, sometimes 40 plus years, right? And so the end user, oftentimes, in my opinion, they often feel like, well, is my job going to disappear because we are implementing these new strategies or these new processes? Like, how do I fit into that? So I think knowing what role you play in that and knowing what say so you have in that, is key, but also encouraging your people to ask why. These people should ask why are we changing, why now, why is this important, what happens to my job. I think asking that why question is very important, but I like what you said about the accountability measurement. Making sure that once we do implement this change, that this change is sticky, right? And that what we did implement is actually working and is making a difference. So having someone sort of lead that effort with whatever that project was and reporting back either on a monthly or quarterly basis, I think that's great advice, Mike. I really like that. So I'm going to go to Jake's comment now. Hey, Jake. And he says, good morning, Mike. I'm curious, in your experience, what type of integrations are possible for a public safety case management solution? For example, is it possible for a police case management system to integrate seamlessly with a court case management system?
That is a great question, Jake. And yes, the answer is yes. There are some solutions out there, some software vendors that try to be in the entire public safety space. So they would have a records management solution for a police department, a computer aided dispatch solution for their dispatch centers. And then they have actual judicial management solutions. They've got
Mhm.
court software that is part of their package that seamlessly integrates. If you decide to buy the records management solution that your court is using, or the court's going to upgrade and they want to buy the court solution that the police department's using, you can do that. You flip a switch and they seamlessly talk to each other. So that is absolutely possible. It's not as common because police department budgets, police department decision makers are different than the court decision makers. And so generally, police department buys what's best for them, the court buys what's best for them. They're on different cycles. Sometimes I don't even think about, oh, well, what's the police department using or what's the court using? And so very often they will end up with different software solutions from different vendors. Integrations are typically very possible. Most of the software that programs out there, there can be some integrations with one way or another. Either a direct integration where you pay the vendor and they manipulate and send the data in a way that the other vendor can utilize. Or we use a lot of replicated databases where we will take your data, replicate it so that we're not touching your live side, slowing it down, and then build an integration that will send that data in a format that's ingestible by the other software vendor. The only time it's really not feasible for integrations is there are some state and local systems that are proprietary. They're very, your county jail creates some kind of a system, and their IT is very secure about who can actually come in and touch our data so that it doesn't get stolen, manipulated, whatever. And there are some systems that are locked down that they just say, you can read from our system, but we don't allow anyone to push information into the system. And so in those cases, generally integrations are not possible just because the owner of that system won't allow it.
Right. Right. If you all do not know Clay or Jake, they both work on our delivery side, on project delivery, and both have very unique insights to the projects and the work that we do on Avero, or at Avero, not on Avero. But please connect with them outside of this live. They'd be happy to share any information or answer any questions you may have. Let's go to Lexi's question here. She says, how can technology be used to enhance community engagement and public trust in safety initiatives? Good question, Lexi.
That is an excellent question. So I obviously, with the way society is today, some of the concerns and issues that we've had, public trust, visibility, transparency is huge, and it should be. I mean, the public has given us an enormous responsibility, and they should expect us to be transparent about how we're using that and what's happening in the agencies, be able to trust it. Feedback is key. So there are old school methods. Coffee with a cop. Hey, every month we're going to pick a coffee shop in a different neighborhood. Come and talk to your local beat officers. Ask them questions. Complain about why aren't you doing this, or why are you doing this, or whatever.
Mhm.
But just get out there and meet your folks on a one-on-one basis. Again, that relationship building is great. Community town halls. We would do those on a regular basis. We would have them at the police department. We would go out to the community and do them in we'll pick a faith-based organization that had a assembly hall big enough that we could host a community event. When there were particular areas of interest, if we had an increase in residential burglaries in the neighborhood, we get right out in front of it. We go out and meet. We bring the detectives that are working the cases. We bring the chief. We bring the commanders, and we talk to that community and say, look, we know this is happening in your neighborhood. We want to be transparent. Here's what's happening. Here's what you can do to safeguard your property to reduce the probability of you being a victim. And here's where we're at on the cases. But technology can also be utilized. So we implemented a software system that would actually, looks like I lost you for a minute there. We implemented a software
You're
solution
back.
that would actually do an audit of our CAD calls. So we would say, on these specific CAD calls, we would like you to reach out to the reporting party and ask them how we did. Just do a quick survey. If it's recorded as a cell phone number, we would send a text and say, hey, if you would be willing to do a survey, click this link. And it would say, how was your service, your officer, all of that. And we would get reports, dashboard reports back every month on customer satisfaction. on the
Mhm.
calls that we handled, and we could follow up. It's great to be able to go to an officer's briefing and say, hey, you handled this call last week. This person was so happy with the way you performed and what you did, and thank you for what you're doing. It's great to be able to give those attaboys, because all too often we spend our time focusing on the,
The
you
bad.
screwed this up.
Mhm.
It's great to be able to do the positive side of that as well. So technology really can be used, for those things. I mean, it's super easy anymore to have an app to have on your website, commend an officer. Um, we're very good about saying file a complaint, but right next to it, hey, commend an officer. If they did a great job, tell us about that as well. So
Mhm.
that engagement is huge. And then, that transparency, social media is everywhere. So
Oh, yeah.
we had the ability to post on our social media certain call types. You know, traffic we automatically post. Like if there's an accident in an intersection, we automatically blast it out on our Twitter, on our Facebook. Hey, there's a major accident at this intersection, and it happened automatically with software. Avoid it. The intersection's closed down, so our citizens would know. I'm trying to get to work. Don't go through there. You're just going to make the situation worse. But
Mhm.
but then your everyday stories on your social media for engagement. You know, everybody loves pet stories, found pets. We would post those
Mhm.
all the time. Pictures of the pet, officer, dispatcher playing with it. If this is your dog, if you know whose dog this is, please let us know. Those sorts of engagements on what's going on, what's happening in your town, um, are critical to engaging your public and building that trust.
Yeah, absolutely. I really agree with highlighting the good. Anymore, we always hone in on the bad stories, the bad thing that happened. Like, let's highlight that. But speaking of stories, the other day I was scrolling through my social media, like I like to do in my off time, and I saw a video of the most precious police officer. He was a resource officer at one of the elementary schools in my hometown, and he on Fridays brings like a whole speaker set up and plays music for the kids as they're crossing from the car line into the school. And I thought, man, just a little extra something to get the
Mhm.
kids excited and to show them that police officers are not bad. They're not bad, because I feel like that messaging, it gets hairy. And so anyway, when you mentioned about transparency and sharing the good, I wanted to mention that video I saw the other day
That
while I was
that's a
scrolling.
That's a great point. I mean, we hear a lot of. I always cringe. You hear parents walk their kids up and go, "See, if you're not good, he's going to arrest you and take you to jail." Don't tell your
Yes.
kids that. Don't
No.
make them scared of the police. We actually had a program where we would schedule lunch, at the schools, and the officer would come in and sit with the kids and have a school lunch, with the kids and talk to the kids at all of their lunch breaks, so they got to know us. At the
Mhm.
start of school, we would have officers out there welcoming all the kids back to school, talking to them as they're coming into the campus,
Mhm.
um, just trying to build that understanding and trust with the kids at a younger age is huge.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. I remember in high school we had a resource officer who actually came out during our breaks, like you mentioned, lunch break, and then we had a break in the afternoon, like ten to 15 minutes, and he would come out and communicate with us and cut up with us, and he would come to our sporting events, and that meant something. We felt protected, but we also felt like we had a friend and mentor in our resource
Mhm.
officer. So very special relationship with them. But one, I'm going to take one to two more questions because we're coming up on an hour here. But Mike, you've shared some incredible advice. But we have a question, Megan Seaton and Mike. How customizable is the solution to fit specific case management needs? Good question.
Yeah, you know, I always say customization is a two-edged sword. So I'm great with software programs that will allow you within the software itself to customize fields, workflows, things that aren't altering the base software.
Hmm.
They're native to it. That customization is awesome, and there are definite varying levels out there between software vendors on how customizable from not very, quite honestly, to very customizable, within those solutions. Workflows, being able to customize workflows for different events for different users is huge. It's a time saver, and it makes it very efficient for their work. So there are very customizable solutions out there. That double-edged sword is when agencies start saying, well, it's not really native to the software, but I want this. And so the software vendor will write a custom code just for that agency. And what happens is when you start getting into that game and you have too many of them, your support
Mhm.
calls become a nightmare because support your setup is your coding is different than everybody else. And when you call in for help, your software support people can't help you because they don't know how your code's written. They don't understand why it's different, why it's working different than it does in every other agency. Worst case scenario, I know of an agency that wanted to customize the software for them. Like it's got to be exactly the way that we want it. They actually hired software engineers away from a software company to work for them to completely customize the code to the point that it couldn't be supported anymore by the vendor. It's now all on the agency, and after a number of years, it just became unmanageable, and they replaced it with an off-the-shelf solution.
Mhm.
So be careful what you wish for. If it's within the parameters of the software code, all day long, every day, that's great. Use it the way that you works best for your organization, but be really careful about customizing something outside what is normal when you need support or when something breaks.
Yeah, yeah, and just to add to that, I think it's important for organizations to really do that groundwork that Mike mentioned at the beginning of our live stream today. You know, making sure that you know what your processes are, you're mapping those out, and you truly understand how it will fit into a newer cloud-based solution. And really documenting that and understanding what can be changed and what's clunky. I don't like customizations, to be honest with you, just for the reasons that Mike mentioned. It becomes clunky, you know. And could you have changed that process in the beginning before you even selected a vendor? So that's my 2 cents. But last question, Mike, for you. I do want to cover this before we go. What other initiatives do we help public safety entities with other than just selecting and implementing software?
We are great at IT strategic plans. So if your organization is looking for, hey, where are we? Where are our deficiencies, our needs currently, and where do we need to be in the future, and what's the roadmap to get us there? We are great at that. We've done that for a number of organizations. So reach out to us on that as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Mike, you did an incredible job today. I think our viewers have a lot of good insight to our public safety practice, and we'll be seeing you again. We're going to have you back on. I'd love to have you in our workshop. I think we're going to schedule some time just for public safety, schools, some of these quasi government type agencies, and some of the work that we do there. So make sure that you sign up for our ERP workshop right here, right there. Scan that QR code, sign up. Please join us. We'd love to have you. It's a great time for our viewers to interact with other public safety and public sector organizations to really talk about some of the same issues that you all are dealing with, because a lot of it is crossover. And then we'll provide a very unique forum for you guys to gain free advice. So, again, it's absolutely free. Please sign up below and follow us on all social media channels. We love to hear from you. We want to help you with your digital transformation project, and we want to guide you to the right solution. So, without further ado, I will see you guys next week. Thank you for joining us. And Mike, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.